Morning everybody, I'm Susan from Abigail's Bed and Breakfast in here in Ashland in Oregon. So today I just thought I would show you a very quick French fruit cake. Normally it's done with strawberries, but today I'm going to use some frozen blueberries and some raspberries just to give a little bit of a taste. So this machine here that I'm using is a Thermomix machine. I've had this machine for more than 10 years. I used to do teaching in a school with it, and it's a lifesaver. It's an amazing little machine. So it's called a Thermomix. So it does everything for me, and I use it a lot for my baking. So one of the nice things about it is that it weighs everything for me. So I call it my one-pot stop. So what you do is just weigh out. I'm going to give you an example here because I've weighed the rest of the stuff. So I'm going to weigh my butter here. So there's a weighing scale built into this machine, and this is the scale here. So I'm just going to cut my butter, and I need one stick, which is normally about 113 grams. So I discovered when I first came here, we normally work in grams. So I'm going to weigh 113 out. So I will put this recipe up for people to have a look at, and it's really easy. So I always say about recipes that they are a guidance to something greater. So I'm going to say that's roughly about it. 110, so 120. So as I was saying about a recipe, I find recipes are always a guidance to something greater. If you've been baking for a long time, you can normally figure out what should and what shouldn't go in a recipe. Sometimes you get lucky and it works out well. Other times it's a bit more difficult, especially when baking is, in my opinion, considered as chemistry. So just be careful about what you do. When you're first doing a recipe for baking, I always say stick to the actual recipe and get comfortable with it before you start messing around. So with this recipe, we need one stick of butter, which I'm going to put in here, and we need a cup of sugar. So I'm going to stick that in there. And what we need to do is we need to cream this butter and sugar. So my machine's going to do all of this for me. So I don't have to do it, and I don't have to use a whisk or anything else. So just excuse the noise for a little while. So this is how quickly it creams butter and sugar. It's got a very strong blade in there. So that's my butter and sugar creamed. So the next thing that this recipe is going to ask for is eggs. So what I do is I put in all my wet goods. So I'm going to put 2 eggs in here. Got to put a bit of vanilla essence, 1 teaspoon. And then it says half a cup of sour cream. I love using buttermilk, so I'm going to stick with buttermilk here. So all I'm going to do here now is just scrape down my sides. I'll show you. And it will look a bit congealed. That's the only word I can use for this. It always looks like this when you start adding liquids to the butter and the sugar, but don't worry because it comes together. Just persevere. Used to working the other way, not forwards. Okay, I just wanted you to see me using this machine. So I'm going to put that back on to finish the mixing. So next, what I'm going to do is take a stainless steel bowl, any old mixing bowl. I love these. I find these in Goodwill, and they're just wonderful. They're wonderful for baking, for mixing stuff, for doing egg whites. They're just very versatile. So into this bowl, I'm going to put my other ingredients, and this is a 1 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. So that's going in there. 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. I'm going to add a little bit of salt because I think salt always actually brings out the flavor in something. So just add a little bit of salt. You'll be amazed at the difference in flavor. I use it a lot in making oats because it just brings out the flavor of oats, and you don't actually have to put sugar in them, just a little bit of honey. Anyway, so what I'm going to do different today is I'm actually going to put a little bit of cinnamon in here. Quite like the idea of cinnamon. So I'm going to throw my cinnamon in. And the other thing that I'm going to try today, this is me experimenting because I've done this recipe so many times for my guests here at breakfast. I'm actually going to throw some slivered almonds in, slivered almonds. So these are just almonds that have been cleaned, the skin's taken off them, and just cut into little long lengths. So I'm going to put a little bit of them to try because I think they'll go really well with blueberries. And the next thing I'm going to do is put my fruit in, my frozen fruit. So sometimes recipes call for fresh fruit, but for some reason I think when it's frozen it seems to hold the cake together a little bit better, and instead of sinking to the bottom they stay kind of central to the cake. So this is me. I'm just going to make sure my fruit's covered in the flour. That's another secret to stop fruit sinking to the bottom of the cake. Just cover it with flour. And then I'm going to turn that off. And there's your mix. As you can see, it's still fairly curdled. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I should move the Thermomix out the way. And then what I'm going to do is just add that to my dry ingredients. When you're baking, especially for the first time, I think it's quite important to get all your ingredients set out first. You don't have to necessarily weigh them, but just have them together. So you're not running around wasting time looking for stuff. Just put them all on the table, go through your recipe. Then I always say, break it down into A, B, C. So put all your dry ingredients that you need, all your wet ingredients, and then other additions lastly. And work it that way. It's so much easier to make your cake. So I'm just going to fold this all in. I always fold in. I never stir. I like to fold. Don't know why, but I think it gives a little bit more air. You're not overworking the cake too much, or the batter. And this is so easy, so simple, and delicious. Now I serve this for breakfast, strangely enough, and it always goes down a treat. And I serve it with a non-dairy ice cream. My guests love it, especially in the summer when it's quite hot. So there's my batter. Isn't it looking gorgeous? Look at all that. Raspberries, blueberries, and almonds. Yeah. What more could you ask for? Perfect consistency. Also, buttermilk tends to give rise to cakes a little bit of an extra rise and an extra lightness. And if you don't want to use milk, if you're lactose intolerant, that's me done. If you're lactose intolerant, I've played around with orange juice, and that seems to work well as a good substitute for milk. So try that. So I'm just going to spread this out a little bit. Flatten it. I just took an ordinary pie dish. It's a perfect size for this amount. Again, this is a pie dish I found when I was rummaging in Goodwill. I love to rummage in Goodwill. They have of the most amazing bits and pieces that I find for my kitchen. Love it. So there's your cake. And then lastly, what I'm going to do is I've got a 1/4 cup of sugar here, fine sugar. And again, I want to carry through the cinnamon flavor. So I've put a teaspoon of cinnamon in here. If you don't like a lot of cinnamon, just reduce it. This again is just a deviation from the original recipe that I've got comfortable with. And what I'm going to do is just sprinkle the sugar on the top of this cake. And you might think it's an awful lot of sugar, but for some reason it works. I've tried to reduce it. You don't get that crispiness on the top that you do if you sprinkle the sugar. When this cake comes out the oven, it has got this gorgeous crisp top and this moist custardy inside. And that's it. So I'm going to stick this in the oven and I'm going to bake it on about 350 for probably about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a look at it afterwards. Thank you.